India's LinkedIn and Facebook live panel discussion on the occasion of World Human Rights Day. I'm your host Vikas Kataria at Audit India, and today we're going to discuss about ensuring access to safe and sustainable sanitation for all, a roadmap for the future. Just hold back for a moment and think. This year, as we celebrate the World Human Rights Day, the theme is reducing inequalities and advancing human rights. We just on the heels of we just celebrated International Day for Persons with Disabilities just exactly a week ago. And if we just imagine, there are a number of challenges when it comes to ensuring access to wash for everyone everywhere, especially for the people with disabilities at this point in time. When it comes to equality, the issues of sanitation workers and people engaged as manual scavengers continues to exist. As per government's own estimates, as of July 2019, approximately more than 54,000 people are still engaged as manual scavengers, wherein we claim that we've eradicated this. The number could be expected to be a lot higher, as this survey was only carried out in a fraction of districts, which is about 170 districts in 18 states, and data around access-friendly washroom continues to be sketchy at its best. With a 2016 national level audit of government buildings, which clearly shows that 95% of public buildings audited did not have the toilet for differently abled. And of the 5% which did not have toilets for the disabled, only 75% were in a very bad state per se. This World Human Rights Day, we will address some of these issues and how corporates through CSR initiatives can address some of these aspects in the coming years. So to do so, let me introduce my illustrious panel to you today. I have Mr. Amit Shekhar with me. He is the Assistant Vice President for CSR at HDFC Bank Limited. He represents Eastern and Northeastern India for HDFC Bank. Welcome, Amit. I
Thanks,
have
Vikas.
I have Ms. Kinkini Roy Chaudhary. She's the Managing Director for Accenture Development Partnerships. Kinkini, welcome to the panel discussion.
Thank you, Vikas. Hello, everyone.
I have Ms. Aditi Vijay. She's the Lead Sustainability and Agro Development for AB InBev. Welcome, Aditi.
Thank you, Vikas. Thank you for having me on board.
And lastly, I have Mr. V.R. Raman. He's the Policy Advisor at WaterAid India. Welcome, Raman, to the panel discussion.
Thanks and glad to join, Vikas.
Thank you. Dear viewers, do send across your views as well as your comments or any questions that you may have by posting on WaterAid India's LinkedIn or Facebook handles with the hashtag CSR Matters. We will take up your questions with our panelists during our Q&A session. Before we get talking, just consider some of these quick facts which hover predominantly around wash infrastructure and its accessibility and equity amongst the vulnerable groups such as the sanitation workers. As I was just referring to the 2016 audit conducted by Government of India, only 5% of the government buildings had toilets for the disabled. In the name of accessibility, most of these buildings have constructed ramps, but there are no handrails, there are no gradients, and these are so poor that most of them need to be demolished and constructed again. In 2018, Accessible India conducted a national level audit of sample of primary health centers across the country. And the findings were very stark. None of the PHCs had disabled friendly toilets. All the facilities had squatting type of toilets with no western commode, which means that majority of the disabled cannot access it. Almost 85% had an accessible pathway. About 90% had a ramp for the wheelchair. 36% had accessible doors, but no PHC had height adjustable examination table. Only about 42% had accessible wash basin for hand washing. Many requirements may be such as color contrast scheme for the floor, wall or sanitary fittings, height of the mirror, toilet accessories, or so much so that even placement of flush were absent in most of these toilets. So this is the kind of state of affairs at this point in time. In one of the Lok Sabha responses, the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment mentioned that out of around 1.2 million government and aided schools in the country, only had around zero point 0.8 million, which is roughly about 71%, had barrier-free accessibility for children with physical disability, which means that which has ramps and handrails only. If we quickly look at the vulnerable index, where sanitation workers, their health and safety standards are met, a research was conducted by DY Patil International University, where over 90% of the sanitation workers in Assam, MP, Delhi, and Mumbai were found to have uh, you know, uh, no cleaning tools or health insurance or access to healthcare facilities or even basic things like COVID-19 test during this pandemic. Another two-thirds did not have instructions or safety training for COVID-19. Simple things as mask, gloves, caps, soaps, or sanitizer, contrary to the central government guidelines. WaterAid and Urban Management Center conducted a study in 2020 in health, safety, and challenges of the sanitation workers during COVID-19, which clearly indicated that almost 23% of sanitation workers interviewed in India had to work for longer hours during pandemic, ranging for an additional 2 to 6 hours per day. 40% of the respondents lacked access to hand washing stations with water, soap, and other such things at the places of work. Less than 20% of the sanitation workers across study locations reported undergoing thermal screening or medical examination. Rest 80% did not even have access to these facilities. Working hours increased roughly about, for 23% of the sanitation workers, and most of them not receiving compensation per se for the additional hours they had to put in into this. There are many of these stark realities which we all deal with at this stage of time, but there are some silver linings too. In addition to the government flagship programs, that of SBM plus plus, corporate sector has also been actively engaging in solving these problems. I have an eminent panel today comprising of representatives from different corporates and a sector expert from the development space. So let's try and find out some of the answers to these questions today. So let me turn to Amit first of all. Amit, you've been working with HDFC Bank, and HDFC Bank has an extensive outlay. You've had massive inroads in the space of individual household toilets as part of your Parivartan program across about 12 states, and you've constructed about 7,000 toilets, which are individual household toilets. How do you factor in accessibility in building these toilets for the persons with disabilities? And then let's, in case you also have, some of your opening remarks also, please feel free to add, and then you could respond to this question, please. Over to you, Amit. Amit, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Unmute. Yeah.
So thanks, Vikas, for asking this question. And first of all, I'm glad to be here to share my views, our organizational, views on the issue of WASH, and particularly when we look into sanitation per se, that where are we and what should we do, the way forward from here. So SDFC Bank has been very proactive when it comes to WASH as program priority, and we started our intervention around building toilets, community toilets or school level intervention since 2016-17. We started entire initiative. The idea behind focusing on WASH facilities was just because of the fact that WASH component has a very high impact on family's income in terms of health issues if family going to face, and it also has a very huge impact in terms of health issues to the individual. So we thought that in order to strengthen income of a family, or working on livelihood front, or getting into education, at the same time, we felt the importance of working on WAS components, and primarily the focus was on providing clean drinking water to all the reference community with whom we work, and secondly, to ensure the sanitation facility, I mean household level toilets, in all those households where we can reach. So just to make sure that on health front the family is very they are fine enough, and they are engaged in economic activity at the best of their potential. So that was the idea behind taking this issue up. And fortunately, after the CSR amendment came in, CSR rules were framed in 2014. At the same time, at the very same time, Swachh Bharat Mission was also introduced. So it was an opportunity for all of us to align with the national priority also. So it brought the focus directly on washed components, and we started building upon that. And as you rightly said, that there are vulnerable groups also involved in the entire scenario. There are manual scavengers who are involved. There are persons with disability for whom we have to take appropriate steps to ensure that their access to sanitation facility, or even for that matter drinking water, has to be really safe. I would also like to add the one of the most vulnerable section to it. I mean, based on my experience, I can tell you that women and girls in rural areas, because we work very extensively in rural areas, we face this challenge while talking about constructing household level toilets, and working on clean drinking water issues. So we felt that women and girls are equally vulnerable because of lack of safety once they are going outside for as daily course. They need to go, they need to fetch water, they need to go out for toilet and all. So it brought our attention to also take up individual household latrine thing into our agenda, and it became integral part of our holistic approach for rural development. So presently I'll like to make one correction only, because in terms of our reach and how we are proceeding on our agenda around wash. We are working in 21 states, and covering around 80 plus million people as beneficiary. And if I talk about individual level, household level toilets and all, so we have constructed around 30,000 toilets till date, and we have reached out to around 2,000 schools, government schools, wherein we have ensured that separate units for boys and girls, and especially able children are made. Though I cannot claim that everywhere we have been able to do that, because land is a very big issue in those schools. In many schools we face that there is not ample land available to construct like the way we wanted. We had been following WHO and UNICEF standards, but that was a major challenge. So this brings me also to a point where I can quickly highlight few of the challenges which we had been facing. One is the behavioral aspect, which we came across. I mean, even toilet were created, but those were not being used by family members. So we came across that thing also. And subsequently, there were families who were landless, and it majorly you'll find these kind of families in suburban areas or in municipal areas or slums. But surprisingly, I visited one of the areas in Samastipur where even panchayat land or common land was not available to construct common toilet for community toilet for number of households. So these are few issues where we have also learned and we experimented certain things. We brought technology also for, say, for example, if we are working on community toilet concept, then maintenance is a major issue. Supply of water is again a major hurdle to make those toilets functional. So we introduced technology into it. We provided solar based pumps to fetch water in overhead tanks and then handed it over to a user committee to manage it. So there are several learnings, and as CSR, everyone who is committed for community development causes, we need to be really on the ground to experience and learn that how we can really include especially the vulnerable groups to our agenda, and how we can also integrate those aspects which cannot be addressed by government directly. Probably because of our engagement we can do that, our partner NGOs, and we have enough grounding to bring those knowledge on board.
Thanks, Amit. I think very pertinent points you made, particularly in access, and then your focus groups, particularly when you looked at landless, or even looked at people who are not having access to the basics per se, and how do they sustain on that? How do you bring coverage even in the school groups and other things? But still, I guess, having said so, the disability focus is still growing. It's still to reach, and inclusion of vulnerable groups is still to come a distance on that. Amit, I will come back to you on another follow-up questions. Let me turn to Kinkini. Kinkini, earlier this year, Accenture was a part of, Sarfati Sanitation Challenge in the sanitation-related entrepreneurship solutions. Tell us more about this. What really transpired? What are the aspects it addressed in inclusion of sanitation solutions, and maybe even the vulnerable groups on that? Over to you, Kinkini, please.
Sure. Thank you, Vikas. So I will probably help you understand why is it that you see Accenture getting involved in the Surfity challenge, right? The sort of backstory behind that is that Accenture as an organization with 560,000 employees worldwide has committed to certain SDG goals, which are very clearly defined for us. There is a net zero emissions by 2025, that we want to go net zero in the next 4 years. We want to move to zero waste by 2025, and we want to plan for all of our water risk by 2025. Now, this can't happen with only the footprint that we have with our employees in offices. We believe that we will have to work with our clients, with our suppliers, and with our NGO partners. So, apart from the mothership Accenture, which is a consulting firm as we know it, um, where I sit is Accenture Development Partnerships. And I wanted to call that out because our mandate is to bring in all that we do in the commercial world with our clients on their strategies, on their enterprise architectures, on their digital strategies and implementations, IoT enabled solutions, you name it. We actually bring, and our mandate is to bring all of that thinking and skill set into the development sector. So when something like Sarfati comes up, it makes us scratch our head and we think, why should we be here? Right. So the reason that we chose that was because it was with very knowledgeable and established partners in the sanitation space, Aqua for All. And we found that there was a business element to this. And sanitation, very interestingly, if you look at the Western countries, not so much of a problem. Africa, lot of problem, probably the same degree as in South Asia, but the innovation level of those solutions, combining pay as you go, combining insurance of the toilets, and activating a lot of community help groups in order to bring those solutions to life, it's exemplary. So when Sarfati came to us, we said, what is it that we have learned in Africa that we can bring to this context as well? So we joined hands with Aqua for All, and we said we're going to help in two ways. One is when these social enterprises, which have an intention of doing good, but at the same time making money, they come up with an idea. It's largely focused on the needs of the end user. And to your and Amit's point, the end user is always left behind, right? And most of the solutions, you talk about the toilet solutions, you talk about even the water solutions, waste management solutions, they are meant for the predominant force, which is people like you and me, right? There is no design, there is no afterthought or no additions to the products or training to the service providers, which enables the voice of the vulnerable. uh, you said it, adolescents, pregnant women, people with disabilities, elderly, I would even say transgenders. If you were ever to go to a transgender colony, you will see they have no sanitation solution at all. So there was what we said was, within this challenge, we will make sure that we prioritize solutions that are bringing these end user needs as well. So when we started to, so what happened was we launched this, I think, back in March, and we invited invitations across the globe. And I think about July this year. Oh, before this version of 2021, we used to run it as an award ceremony, which wasn't cutting it. So we said we want to bring something more to the table, and let's get into some kind of acceleration. So we said, all right, let's look at this portfolio of 10 semi-finalists, and we were ranking them on how much of a percentage of reach do they have, which vulnerable communities are they addressing. We also tested their business models on scalability, also the financial feasibility, what is the per unit cost, and can they make it work in large scale implementation projects. When all of those boxes were checked, we said, all right, these are our 10 semi-finalists. And with them, we started to do certain workshops. Again, this is something that Accenture, of course, we do it with our clients day in and day out in terms of thinking through their scaling strategies. We wanted to have the similar discussion with these social enterprises and say, which part of your business model is not looking good? Do that heat mapping for them to understand where is it that Accenture can provide mentoring services, coaching, and possibly even do some projects with them, just to bring them up to speed and get them to a level where they can scale quickly with the investments. And not only did we facilitate that technical assistance, if you were to call it, but we also facilitated access to finance, where along with I think along with Accenture, we prepared these pitch decks for them that they would take to their investors. And they also had forum with the Ministry of Climate in the Netherlands. They had VC Connects in the World Week that happened in November. So we are sort of looking at a market-driven sanitation approach when we want to look at this sector. That's sort of our sweet spot.
Thanks, Kinkini. I think very wonderful to hear about some of the aspects which you mentioned about, your going beyond your employee basis, or you're not inward looking, you're outward looking, which is great to hear. It almost coincides with a triple bottom line approach, where you kind of looking at people, planet, and of course, profit is where you're investing your money on that. So, can you just tell me about how Accenture sees itself, developing a roadmap for evolving space for accessible sanitation solutions? Maybe you can supplement it with a couple of examples if you have anything in the pipeline.
Yeah, sure. So, because we are as good as our clients and as our member partners, and while we can be doing our own little thing, we seriously feel that systemic change can only happen when we work and talk to our partners and clients the same language and bring everyone together. So if you I'm just making a little plug here, please don't mind, but we are talking sustainability to even our utilities clients, our banking clients for that matter. And we're saying, what are we doing to make our footprint net zero, water risk protected, as well as that which is favorable towards communities that we work and live with. So that's pretty much the narrative that we are propagating, and we believe that our role as Accenture in this sanitation space is um, that of a facilitator, because we work with a lot of these industry partners through our ventures channel. There's a Accenture Ventures team that focuses on identifying early innovations, and their day job is to meet these startups and find out what solutions are they offering in the market, and then trying to plug them into the value chains of our clients to see if that can help them achieve the scale that they need to. So that's one critical part or role that I see Accenture playing in this sanitation pathway. The other bit is also through our Accenture development partnerships. We have the opportunity to work with the likes of UN Global Compact, WaterAid for that matter. We work a lot with you guys, WSSCC, where we are trying to bring certain skills like human centered design thinking, right? When you can design a product which is, let's say, an app focused on just the needs of the consumer, why cannot you design a toilet solution focused on the needs of the consumer? So we're bringing all of that thinking with our clients to really bring the design perspective and enable decision making for the user by bringing in their voices. So that's again something that we are very keen to bring in those voices through very methodical techniques and methodologies. And then the third bit is really about, like I had mentioned in that Sarfati challenge conversation that we had, we believe that we will be able to utilize our mentoring and technical assistance skills, because consulting has all of those line function services in terms of supply chain strengthening, technology scale up, marketing and sales. So we can actually help build almost the conducive enabling environment for a market driven approach towards sanitation, and that's where we see our role panning out in the future.
Great to hear about your thoughts, Kinkini. I think some of these are really resonating well, particularly when you say that you are looking at early innovations and then linking them to the value chains. I guess even if it gets included on the toilet technologies, there are lots of things which are needed, particularly when we say that we compare ourselves to the developed economies, where if we go outside and we feel that, look, the kind of hygiene or cleanliness is being paid attention to, we still have a long distance to cover on that. But we have our own set of contextual problems, and these problems generally invariably gets unaddressed in this entire copy paste mechanism. So we fix things contextually and bring value chains. I think that's going to solve a great deal out of it. So thanks for that, Kinkini. Let me move to Aditi. Aditi, we've been seeing that ABN Bev has been investing a great deal in terms of your models on climate action and sustainability, and water has been sitting as a part of it. But as you deal with water in various of these aspects, what is your approach? How do you build the linkages with sanitation, or so to say the wastewater processing, or any of these aspects which could certainly pave a long way for the community relief and those vulnerable groups which are kind of at the bottom of the pyramid? How do you address these situations, and what is your approach particularly on that?
Yeah, thank you, Vikas. I think, and just want to also thank you, WaterAid, for like I think picking up this topic. I guess with COVID-19, we really cannot anymore undermine how important water as a resource it is, and its relevance has only gotten increased. So it's, I mean, I think it's, as a resource, it has a multifold impact. Access to water, sanitation, hygiene, these things, I mean, these aspects of our life have multifold impact. So it could be, education, where we see people dropping out because of no access. It could be on the economics aspect of it, where people probably will be having lesser lifespan because of probably waterborne disease or things like that. So I think a very, very relevant topic to kind of because of its multifold impact. And I mean, I think as an organization, we truly believe that there's a very, very important role that we have to play. Talking about what we do at AB InBev, for us, sustainability is not something that is a parallel work stream for us. It is something which is a very much a part of our business. So we do not see sustainability something which we do outside of our business. It's something that we do as our business. And if you see our 4 sustainability goals, which is smart agriculture, water stewardship, climate action, and circular packaging, in a great way they are linked to what we do as business in Alcobev. So all of these aspects have a very, very strong value chain connect with what we do, right from sowing the seed of barley till the time the beer is sipped. So each of this entire component of value chain is highly ingrained into what we do also under our 4 sustainability pillars. Water, to be specific, so our goal talks about access to water. So if we talk about Alcobev sector, it's a water guzzling industry. It consumes a lot of water. I mean, there's no denying the fact, and hence, I think as a responsible corporate, it is our it's our duty to ensure that there's not something that we do not leave the community with a water negative status. So hence our focus has always been around the communities where we operate, particularly the breweries or our footprint across wherever we are located. So that's where our focus is. That helps us ensure that yes, we are very focused in our approach and not we not just going all over the place. So I think from that perspective we are very, very clear as to what we want to do. Access to water is something is an important aspect of what we do in that sense. And I think when we talk about sanitation, having access to water does form a very, very important part of ensuring that there is sanitation and hygiene level in the communities where we are operating in. To talk about what we've been able to really achieve is we've been able to create a water recharge potential of about 1.5 billion liters across our 5 high-risk breweries. So, we identify which are the high-risk sites out of our footprint, and from there, and we focus our efforts there. So there is where all the action happens, and we've been able to create a good water recharge potential in that. And having said that, it is not that these interventions just come out of blue and because there's a mandate something has to be done. I think there's a very, very strong baseline assessment that is done by us with the partners that we engage with, and that helps us in understanding what is the need of the community. So it shouldn't be then, because if we do not address it, I think the sustainable aspect of the intervention wouldn't get fulfilled, right? So we need to ensure that what we are giving to the community is something that they really needed, and it's not something that we feel that we should be doing it. So I think that's where our partnerships with our partners across board, where WaterAid also is one of our a very, very important partner, and other partners like ICRISAT, Let's Endorse Force, where we ensure that we do the right baselining to see that what we are doing, how we are intervening in those communities is the right way, is a sustainable way, so that when AB InBev pulls itself out of it, the intervention doesn't fall apart, right? So which is what is an important aspect of our intervention. I mean, having said that this is something which we do outside our fence, and there's also an aspect of our water stewardship which is inside our own brewery. So as I said, that it's a very, very intensive water usage industry where we are operating in. So there's again an onus on us to understand what all efficiencies that we can bring into our own operations to ensure that the per liter of water that we use with the per liter of beer compared is as optimum as possible. So there are steps that we are taking in that direction as well. Our philosophy is on those 3 R's, where we talk about reduce, reuse, and recycle. And by taking up steps such as installing, SS tanks, fresh water, recovering fresh water through our installations of RO, recycling through a treatment plant, and technologies like ZLDs, we've been able to achieve a lot, specifically in the last 4 to 5 years when we started actually baselining, start putting those baselining into places. So, I mean, talking about AB InBev, this is what, to your question as to what we've been able to do.
Thanks, Aditi. I think talking of your terminology, which you used, reuse, recycle, and basically make it
Reduce,
much more,
yeah.
reduce the footprint on that. Just bringing an attention on, you have communities where you work around. You have communities where you see the most vulnerable and marginalized are generally left on the peripheries of the work, peripheries of these communities. They just feed. There are sanitation solutions which are virtually negligible there in these communities. The waste just flows out, the water just goes out and accumulates in the form of ponds or wastewater, surface water bodies. How do you, in your intervention areas, we've seen that you generally use those wastewater ponds and recycle those. What is the kind of approach and thought process behind this, and how do you include those marginalized or vulnerable sections in this scheme of things? Since particularly we are on a World Human Rights Day, how do you ensure that in a way that how they get access to their rights on sanitation per se, while you address this recycling part of it?
Yeah. So again, as I said, that there's a need assessment which happens, and which is what takes us to where where we need to kind of intervene in that community. And as you rightly pointed out, there's an issue of gray water, or waste being created outside those communities where where we operate. And hence it's important for us, which is also what we include whenever we try to whenever there's a scoping that we work out with our NGO partners or with our implementation partners, to ensure that it's not about creating structures and creating that additional recharge potential just by creating new infrastructure. A lot of it also has to come around where there's an existing infrastructure, and that needs to be cleaned up, that needs to be filtered, and there has to be a process around it, so which is also a part of the strategy. So it doesn't mean that every year we go and start creating farm ponds or village ponds or check dams or nala ponds, and all the structures which create recharge potential. But at the same time, there's work that has also been done in the past, and it's important for us to ensure that those structures, which the infrastructure which is already in place, those get maintained. The community gets involved to ensure that it's a usable resource, like it's a usable infrastructure. So that is a part of of our focus whenever we go into an intervention. So, I mean, we do see that, for example, there's the work that we've done in Maharashtra, say 2 years back, and that structure does need some repair work, or a cleaning work, or desiltation work. So that's again becomes a part of our scope when, in our continuous intervention. And also, I think it's important that we are, which is again part of our strategy, that we are closely invested and we do not enter and come out of that community, which is what helps us to also have an eye on what's happening on the ground, and we are not away from the reality.
Thanks, Aditi. I think lots of insights on that. So thanks. As we discuss about infrastructure, generally, I mean, we get carried away with the fact that as if infrastructure is going to solve the issue for us and we will be able to crack the code. But there is other side of it also. We have stakeholders in the form of Safai Karamcharis. We have stakeholders in the form of sanitation workers who are still involved. We have manual scavengers also on the other side. We've got waste pickers as well. During this pandemic, we saw that the frontline workers involved these stakeholders extensively. They were our torch bearers. They were our safeguarding mechanisms in many different ways. But majority of these times they get left out from the mainstreaming. They are on the shorter side of the stick always. They do not get access to things. We've even seen that there are many manual scavengers or sanitation workers who are still dying while opening the manholes or cleaning up the sewerage lines and so on and so forth. This is a stark reality. So when we embark on a journey where we say that, look, we are going to make this country, a sustainable sanitation based or equitable solution based society, that dream will not be fulfilled until we are able to address this aspect. So I guess that brings me to Raman. Raman, WaterAid has been engaging a lot in these aspects. Whether these are manual scavengers or waste pickers, or so to say, sanitation workers. What do you think? What are since we are on Human Rights Day and we're talking about the human rights to these stakeholders, which are very important. Do you think that these rights will look real? And what are the kind of steps WaterAid has been taking on this?
All right. Uh, Thanks, Vikas, and thanks to Amit, Kinkani, and Aditi. So this is, an important and pertinent question when we are all sitting together on the day that embarks. I mean, it's a irony that we have to talk about rights to human rights. That is also something that is happening around, because the rights are not fulfilled. There are ways. There needs to be ways to push it. That is where this day is coming in, and we are talking about reducing inequalities, and all the speakers were trying to say that how their kind of ventures are trying to reduce inequalities in one way or the other. So let us also start with I'll start to respond to your question. Whose rights are getting continuously violated is something that is to be understood properly, because I'll come to why I'm asking this question again, because you have already set up the context. So Kinkani in her talk also was mentioning about the gender minorities. Women and gender minorities always are facing a lot of rights violations. So for women, then when they go out, when they travel, even female friendly toilets, menstrual hygiene friendly toilets are a big kind of issue when it comes to rights to sanitation. So for the last 10 years, we are talking about the rights to water and sanitation as human rights. And from there, in 2016, India passes the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, and wherein we have classified 21 kinds of disabilities, and talking about and 3 years before, in 2013, and even 20 years before that, in 1993, the country bans manual scavenging. In 2013 act is called the Prohibition of Engaging People as Manual Scavengers Act, PEMSR. And we have from 2018 there is a scheme called Self Rehabilitation Scheme for Manual Scavengers. And sanitation work, you have already put up some of the data, so I'm not going into those details. So we all know that globally all organizations are now orienting themselves to something into gender equality and disability and social inclusion, something called JEDC tools. And many call it as leaving no one behind, many call it as social inclusion, many call it as reducing inequalities, whatever. So one problem that we all are stuck at, how to operationalize this. Quite often the rights are seen not from the entitlement point of view as something we grant people rather than they deserve it. So this point of view about rights itself is a major issue that we are continuously facing. So how can we address the justice issues here? Are we going to continue to discuss even next Human Rights Day, or in the upcoming Human Rights Day we may continue to discuss these issues, or are there any ways to address these? Is the kind of things that we were trying to do from the last couple of strategy periods of WaterAid. We are trying to look at this. So one of them was from the theories of human rights, how can we translate them into reality is an issue that. So that is where, with Wash United, UNICEF together, we have tried to develop a toolkit that actually can make officials, the duty bearers, understand what all are the rights and how to provide them. So this is where the word that you used are quite useful here. The toolkit itself is called Making Rights Real, MRR. So the Making Rights Real is a very interesting toolkit, wherein in Orissa, a couple of years before, we started to implement this on ground with water, officials of the PHED department, officials of the rural sanitation department, and also officials of the school education department. These three departments, we tried to do this in three districts of Orissa: Nuapada, Bhadrak, and Devagad. Three districts we tried to engage with these officials. We did a baseline, and at the we took them through this toolkit, and that toolkit, they were trying to use it in their daily work. And once they used it, the incline study, they very clearly said that earlier we were seeing this as something, we are doing kind to these people. Now we know that we are duty bound, we are servants to them, and these are the kind of things that we are supposed to do, and these are the ways that we can do this. And this is how one of the interesting thing was that the best performed official of that lot, as my colleague Vikash Pati, says this, said that the best performing person was saying that I am not even, I have not even begun. So that is where the realization about rights and doing about rights, understanding who is the person who are having the rights, that kind of understanding came into the duty bearer. So we need to have ways of translating the theories into practice, and strategies for that, and tools for duty bearers to understand rights as not just as kind of a theoretical framework, but as something an implementable, actionable reality. So that is the point one. The second thing is about how to apply this on various kinds of people. I told that water sanitation to the commoners is one issue that we looked at. Then we also tried to understand, we tried one municipality, we assessed about the female friendliness of toilets, rights of women in terms of sanitation, and access to sanitation facilities. And then we informed the city officials, this is how you are. And then started the concepts and discussions about the national guideline on community and public toilets. They started something on gender inclusive guidelines and all that. So we have to find ways of making things into reality. Then we came into the sanitation worker issue. Sanitation worker issue, we are engaged in quite a long time now. If we really have to work on sanitation workers issue, we know that there is a law, there is a legal framework, there is duty bound officials, but nothing is happening everywhere. False testimonies are given in the courts, and government of India is not able to complete the surveys, and even in the parliament the full picture is we are not able to provide. So that is the kind of reality about manual scavengers. And when it comes to sanitation workers, it further goes into some kind of 5 million sanitation workers are there, comprising some 9 types of work that people are doing. And within that, direct interface with human physics comes to around 180,000 or something people engaged in this work, wherein 54,000 the government could formally count. Rest of them are not even counted. So that is where the kind of reality. So we are working with these people across, and we are trying to make self-help groups of them, training them into becoming entrepreneurships, and making them understand their rights, helping them to get the identity cards and the schemes and benefits, and getting the next generation of these people educated and going into. But despite our efforts, we are seeing that we are just at the beginning, because the intergenerational problems of multi-layered problems of the casteism and related issues in our country is stopping from these people getting into what they actually deserve and what our officials are duty bound to do for this people. So that we are stuck, but we are deriving ways how to kind of organize people, how to work with them and all that. Coming to the persons with disability, that is even more difficult, because we are the overall 2011 census say that it is less than 3% of disabled people. But after the 2017 census, we did 100 panchayat 10 district assessment in Chhattisgarh to pilot a accessible sanitation framework in that state, wherein it went into a strategy and all that. So what we did was, we went through SHGs and identified all the people, and our understanding was that from 2 point something percentage that the census is saying, we found around 7% of people with different kinds of disabilities in the society. expanding the definition of disability into the 2016 Act definition, and then further going into needs of people for accessible sanitation. Not all disabilities would require accessibility modifications. So we looked at and we found that around 5.5% of the overall population, or some 75% of the disabled population, or some 16 types of disabilities would require some kinds of modification in terms of accessibility for making the sanitation accessible for them. And then through a consultative process, interaction and all that, Chhattisgarh government came up with a strategy. And then now we know that from enumeration to their assessment of the specific problems, and each individual would require different degrees of accessibility. So how to adjust the facilities for them, what kind of supplies are needed, how to prepare the supply chain. There are many questions to be answered in terms of ensuring accessible sanitation for. So we got one of the important point here, since three important colleagues are sitting from the corporate circle. So we got one of the corporates to support the Chhattisgarh government in making this. So half of the 100 panchayat pilot was supported by the Southeastern Coalfields Corporate Social Responsibility. So wherein we could really find that the market supplies that the corporates can definitely influence, because since the requirement is much lesser compared to the larger toilet requirement, how to ensure that all the various pockets of the country, wherever disabled populations are there, how to get the accessibility tools and assistive devices available across, is a question that everyone has to look at. So the rights, when we read it in text, that will just look like words, but when we translate into action, there are many steps that we need to follow. So breaking it up into many steps, that is the first step that we have done now, and we have done the pilot, and now we know that if this needs to be scaled up, how to do it. But actual doing, because I'm talking about close to 5 to 5.5% of the Indian population. It's a big scale. 5.5 of Indian population is somewhat a large country. I mean, India itself is. So we need to realize the scale of it. So I think in these processes, we have a lot to gain from the experiences of and contributions. So government alone cannot do it. So various actors have to come in, and wherein the assistive devices and supply is something that the corporate sector can really contribute into. Then only we can realize these rights. And for that, for getting the government prepared, we can do a lot. The tools because our experience is that one of the worst official, I should not say this here, but still, one of the worst official we encountered with also has become somewhat moderate by the end of our initiative, was the experience that we could find. Because, end of the day, all people are having a human being inside them. From the sympathy to empathy, it's a journey that everyone has to travel. From realizing, what we give as, some kind of charity, to make it as a provision of entitlement, it's a big travel to make for everyone. How to make that happen is the important question that we need to answer on the Human Rights Day, so that right to human right is established. Thank you.
Thanks, Raman. I think very strong points which you made for the stakeholders, which are generally not seen, and they're seen below the line. So obviously, lots of things goes behind the rights for vulnerable, what could be done, particularly how different types of things are needed for the set of population you mentioned. While the percentage is low, it still runs in millions. In a country of 1.3 billion, 5% can be running in 50, 60 million per se. So I think the scale needs to be really picked up on that front. And you made a very pertinent point that how corporates can also play a role in this entire gamut of things, where their solutions could be demonstrated at a scale, and then that could be scaled up and leveraged by government policies in their different aspects. So thanks, Raman, for that. But this brings me back to Amit. The question which generally we were just raising about that fact that how do we really put forward things. I was referring to in my talk about a study where about 40% of sanitation workers claim that they do not have access to any hand washing per se during their work hours or at workplaces. And we can understand how important hand washing is in these times when the COVID is there, and it could prevent a lot of stuff. So there are no hand washing stations, there are no provisions for water accessibility at that level. So when you work in rural areas, Amit, particularly where you've constructed different hand washing stations or toilets or access to water, how do you basically channelize this, and what kind of things basically you keep in mind when you're providing that access to these folks, and how do you ensure that you include these vulnerable sections, particularly the sanitation workers, which are generally part of the communities in the rural belts, but they're ridden with a lot of caste and creed systems in those areas.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks for asking this, because this is very important question, because those are the people who are at the front line. At the same time, they're the most vulnerable, especially if I talk about COVID-19 situation. Then we really faced this challenge. But luckily, our approach as bank has been like, we are 1.3 lakh people in this bank, and which also includes third party people inside the bank. Okay, so they are basically service provider who manages our pantry, or who are managing our toilets and washrooms, who are security guards in our banks, and things like that. And we are fortunate to have such a sensitive board in place, who makes sure that who are the people, whoever are there on the front line, they should be considered first while planning the entire COVID-19 response, or you can say mitigation to the entire threat we had. And even if I talk about my office, we reduced the office strength to 30%. 30% employees were going, and the cycles of those sanitation worker who were managing our washrooms and toilets, uh, that frequency was reduced without firing a single person. So that kind of sensitivity was there at senior management level also. And we kept engaging with them. We provided all the equipments, and I mean things like gloves, mask, and sanitizer provided to everyone at every level. If you talk about our projects on ground, at project level also, charity begins at home. So we started it from bank, and when we reached out to our NGO partner, we faced a similar kind of challenge which they were facing to implement the program, or to even to conduct a meeting. They were supposed to have that safety guard in terms of having mask or hand washing provisions and all. So in all the offices of our NGOs, we ensured at the field level that there are these provisions available. At the same time, we conducted mass awareness among communities also. And by default, we have the most vulnerable section in a particular village as our reference community. We pick only those hamlets or habitations which are neglected, benefit of government schemes are not reaching to them. So we ensured that they are completely aware, they have all the supplies in place, and so much so that we try to ensure cover up their livelihood gain. Because since I handle eastern region projects mainly, so I can confidently say that we helped those families in whatever possible way when it comes to access to wash facilities, or even we try to ensure their livelihood also. So this is one thing which has been like focus when this pandemic strike. Uh, very interesting insight. I have been listening to Raman also, and I'm just forced to respond to his MRR thing, how we should do that. So I'd quickly like to respond to that. I mean, I think that there could be three pointers which we should focus on. And one thing is inclusive approach, integration of everyone. Whoever is vulnerable, that person or that community should be brought into the entire scenario. uh, the approach is second is the approach with which we can ensure the universal coverage of wash across all the areas, entire nation. So that is participatory approach has to be there. Government can say convergence, they can use the term convergence, but on a very wider manner, I can say that bringing everyone together is very much required. Unless you are bringing everyone on the same platform, listening to everyone, their point of view, uh, uh, their way of looking into those aspects is very much required. And third, obviously, is the innovation or technology part. Why still today we have manual scavengers to clean up our mess? So these kind of things can be avoided if we bring technology effectively. And here lies the role of CSR, because we can do that. We have resources to do that. So if we can create some model around it, and if we can showcase, we can promote those models, definitely government is going to take it up. It has to be really like scalable model with a reasonable budget. I feel that that way we can move forward from here, and we in next 4 or 5 years we can say that we have reached the Swachh Bharat mission has been realized now. So
Thanks.
that was my understanding of the entire thing.
Thanks, Amit. Thanks. I think lots of exciting discussions, and I'm sorry that we are running out of time, but at the same time, we have some questions from audience as well. Some of these questions are very interesting. I'm compelled to ask those as well. I just don't want to let go of that. Maybe we'll extend it by 5, 6 minutes. There are three questions which I want each one of you to respond: Kinkini, Amit, and Aditi. I will just put them in order. One is that, are corporates willing to change their strategy from working in their backyards to exploring new geographies where it is needed the most? Kinkani, I remember you mentioning that, you are looking beyond your employee bases and you're looking beyond your clientels as well as even to communities per se. You want to quickly pick it up, a sharp 2 line or 3 line response. That'll be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think corporates, especially now, you would understand that the risk of running businesses is not really just located in their factory areas or in the sort of production units that they have. The risk is real in terms of climate change and in terms of the input material costs which are increasing. If you look at the cost of fuel, if you look at the something like AB InBev, I'm sure the cost of treatment is going up day by day because the efficiencies don't exist. So um, my sense is that yes, corporates are absolutely willing to look beyond their backyard and looking to solve the problem in its totality. However, if we have to somehow decouple this race of CSR reporting with something that is more meaningful and at a systemic level, wherein more and more sort of partners can come together, namely the government, your the NGO partners, communities, more importantly, so that it can create a real delta in the way that businesses calculate risk today.
Thanks, Kinkani. I think very well articulated. I'm glad to see that how CSR is even going beyond their backyards. There were days when they were, the investments were restricted to some 3 or 4 core states, but now these are slowly spreading out. Thanks, Kinkani, on that. There is another question which basically it talks about there are vulnerable sections we've been talking about on Human Rights Day, and these sections have been constantly struggling for their survival. Either we are seeing deaths on one hand, or we're seeing there are lack of safety gears for sanitation workers. There are lack of innovations where they can really do the same job by not exposing their health on that. So, is there any specific thing? And this question is to Amit. Is there any specific thing which your organizations are doing, particularly where either you're investing on safety gears of these kind of vulnerable sections or providing some alternative livelihoods? Because each one of you, particularly the banking sector, runs livelihood programs. How are you looking at mainstreaming them into something which is more meaningful and which is more dignified in that ways?
Right. I'll quickly respond to this, because we look into a problem in a very holistic manner. Okay. And we believe that everyone is capable of doing something to earn their livelihood in a much better manner. So skilling is one thing which we really emphasize. While scaling is primarily nowadays limited to urban pockets and areas around urban centers, but we are going into activating the local economy in rural areas. When I say activating local economy, then we are working on the strength areas of those villages, those rural areas, those cultures, those communities. And it includes artisans, it includes even the shoemaker has to be entrepreneur in days to come. So how to motivate that person or their future generations who are educated and who can take up enterprises in days to come. I'll give you a very simple example. I met someone, a young person in a village in Jharkhand, who was from a backward community in our social setup. We call them backward communities and all. And that person was graduate, and I was amazed to see his motivation to take up dairy farm thing in a very big manner. The area is near to Ranchi, the state capital, and we engaged with the person. We provided some inputs in terms of financing or skill training, and that person has really taken this job into his hand, and now he is doing very very well. You interact with this person and you'll see that it doesn't matter from where he is coming, but now he is in a position where he is an entrepreneur. So that kind of approach we have, and we want to take it further.
Thanks, Amit. I think this example should be scaled up with multiplier or exponential effects, so that we could see that the number of these sanitation workers or manual scavengers which we talk of, which is not a good thing to be in a situation like that. These are also eradicated and mainstreamed differently. Aditi, my question last to you, I think I'm just picking up from audience, is the employee engagement an effective way, or volunteering activities, effective way to start conversations and create a cadre of committed champions of this cause to battle equitable sanitation with dignity, because each one of us have exposure to these manuals, to these sanitation workers around us. So what do you think? What are your views or that of AB and Bev in this case? Just a sharp response on this, please.
No, I think absolutely. Like, there's no denying the fact that we have to engage our employees into what we are doing. They can't be away from the reality of what's happening outside the business. So while it's completely embedded in the business, in fact, like, that's something that we also, at AB InBev, when we talk about sustainability, ensures that we communicate it effectively, we communicate it rightly to our stakeholders internally, so as to bring them on board. Because yes, in their day-to-day work they are very much away from the reality, but then as us who are spearheading this work for the organization, it's our responsibility to ensure that it gets communicated to them in the right sense. So be it the newsletters, be it the town halls, or be it probably weekly engagements that we have through our through our internal communication. We ensure that this communication happens rightly to our internal stakeholders, because at the end of it, it's their their engagement which makes this sustainable also year after year for an organization. I mean, if people are not invested in this idea as to where this chunk of money probably which we are taking and giving or putting, if there's no buy-in internally, there's only as many years that it can go along. So it's important that those are on board.
Thank you very much. I guess I'm sorry we are running out of time. We had lots of exciting discussions where we could really touch upon some of these aspects, if not all. Where we could talk of the vulnerable groups, we could talk of gender and women being at the bottom of the pyramid within the vulnerable groups per se. How behavioral change and the landless could be focused more upon in the construct of things. How even organizations like HDFC Bank, which mentioned that they are reaching out to more number of people within their context of things and beyond. How Kinkini mentioned about the triple bottom line approach in their approach, particularly where they're going beyond profit, they're going beyond their own employees, they're looking at their clients and bringing in all these together to make it people, profit, and planet bringing together. There were discussions about reduce, reuse, and recycle as well, I think, which actually makes a lot of sense, particularly in sustainable sanitation. We could also talk of, the making rights real. Raman made a very pertinent point to the vulnerable sections, where making their rights real in different testable models, which could be scaled up to a level where government could then pick it up at a scale and make it more realistic for them. How the caste systems are ridden for our vulnerable sections, and it's just not about infrastructure alone, and we need to really go way beyond that to address their rights, looking at how inclusion can happen or mainstreaming can also happen within the context of communities, how PWDs or people with disabilities could also be mainstreamed in the entire construct of things. Even though I think Raman made a very pertinent point that people are to the tune of 5.5 or 6%, despite the regulation has been changed and how disabilities are looked upon, it's still a humongous number looking at the size of the country we are in. I guess all these. It's imperative to say that whatever we have made as a progress so far, it's good, but there is still a long road to it to make sustainable, equitable, and accessible sanitation solutions a reality, inclusive of human rights, particularly for all those vulnerable sections of people. If there is no equity provided to vulnerable, then we surely have missed a huge facet of people in this democratic access for all. Safe sanitation is one of the fundamental pillars of human existence, to my mind, which differentiates us from others and make it kinder for all. I'm hopeful that the corporate sector will continue to work in tandem with the development sector and other stakeholders, as rightly pointed out by my eminent panelists, and to find innovative and equitable answers to these problems. Thank you so much for being a lovely audience, and thanks to all my eminent panelists. Thank you for sharing your valuable perspectives. We'll leave you behind with these thoughts and action items to help invest more in sustainable solutions to lift vulnerable communities from the drudgery they face on a daily basis. It is our collective endeavor and a collective responsibility. We sign off for now until we meet again with another episode soon around World Water Day in March 2022, hoping that we will have a better sanitation solution and a situation across the country which is equity sensitive to the vulnerable communities and human rights as well. Thank you very much. We sign off for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Like.